XpoCanna presents
the second annual Connecticut Cannabis Expo.
March 25th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and March 26th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
At the Mohegan Sun, featuring the X Cup, New England's most rigorously tested and judged cannabis competition.
Whether you're an aspiring ganjapreneur or looking to get your medical card and grow your very first plant, the Cannabis Expo has it all, open to the public.
Come enjoy the lineup of guest speakers and lecturers covering topics like growing styles to setting up your cannabis business for success.
Legislation, advertising, accounting, medical benefits, packaging, CBD products, hemp, and more.
Learn and grow with the area's brightest cannabis professionals. Everything cannabis under the sun at Mohegan Sun, March 25th and 26th.
The Connecticut Cannabis Expo, sponsored by
Curaleaf,
Radio 104.1,
1029 The Whale,
The Botanist,
Safetiva,
CRQ,
and High Life Packaging. Tickets and additional info at XpoCann.com.
That's XpoCann.com.
So come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Well, I'm on that new shit, Crown Royal whiskey and Mountain Dew, mixed with sour apple vodkas, and you got your wake-up juice, kid. I use it to help me feel better about making music. I cannot fight against my nature, so I induce it. A few sips, I'm almost ready to get abusive. With loose lips, I turn my enemies into reclusive. It's ruthless, but you don't know you can't undo this. The truth is, I'm in the business of revolution. It's booming, the scarecrow is musical evolution. A fusion of sounds, we crowds gazing confused with. So come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. And now I'm proving that this battle I am never losing. I'm choosing to ignore the cuts and bumps and bruises. I'm cruising through these haters, leave them looking stupid. They foolish if they think they'll ever hear my conclusion. I'm through with all these part-timers and their excuses. I'm bruising eagles left and right every time I do this. I'm shooting for the top, no, I'll never settle where you did. The future's in my hands, my grip will never lose it. My crew is ready to obtain the absolution, removing any doubt that we were ever fooling. So come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution. Come on, step it up, break it down and lose it. Come on, follow us to the new revolution.
Jason Ortiz and Erin Gorman KIRK.
Erin Gorman and Jason are going to join us. I'm going to be I just smoked some blunt, guys. So, and the mushrooms are chilling. But it's beautiful that.
presents the second annual Connecticut Cannabis Expo.
March 25th and 26th at the Mohegan Sun. Whether you're an aspiring ganjapreneur or looking to get your medical card and grow your own, Connecticut Cannabis Expo has it all. Open to the public.
Come enjoy the lineup of guest speakers and lecturers, covering topics ranging from growing to setting up your cannabis business for success. Learn and grow with the area's brightest cannabis professionals.
Tickets and additional info at XpoCanna.com.
That's XpoCanna.com.
XpoCanna presents
the second annual Connecticut Cannabis Expo.
March 25th and 26th at the Mohegan Sun. Whether you're an aspiring ganjapreneur or looking to get your medical card and grow your own, Connecticut Cannabis Expo has it all. Open to the public.
Come enjoy the lineup of guest speakers and lecturers, covering topics ranging from growing to setting up your cannabis business for success. Learn and grow with the area's brightest cannabis professionals.
Tickets and additional info at XpoCanna.com.
That's XpoCanna.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. We're going to hopefully have Jason Ortiz here in a few minutes. You know, parking is so fun here. It's just a little bit of a walk, you know. So I'm ERIN KIRK, and I wanted to get this panel together of incredible experts who are in the trenches right now, writing the laws, rewriting the laws, trying to fix the things that we know.
Fix the bad laws.
We're not good in the beginning. And my background is that I did all the social equity license applications pro bono, and I'm very involved in social equity and veterans affairs. And I'll turn it over to Lou Vega.
Hello, everyone. My name's Luis Vega. I'm the CEO of Nautilus Botanicals. We're a Section 149 cultivation facility in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We also are doing 2 adult use retail operations, one in Stamford and then one we don't know just yet. So still figuring that out, still early stages. I appreciate you, ERIN, for inviting me on. So I guess I'm the current licensee in the state, and I guess I'm no expert by any means, but I'm going through the trenches. So thank you.
And I'm Ann Hughes. I'm one of the policymakers that were trying to craft the 2021 bill. But I got to say, we're all policymakers. None of us are experts, so we definitely relied on Lou here. We relied on Jason. We relied on ERIN. We relied on other states' experience with rolling out the recreational cannabis market and legalization and decriminalization. We had to really emphasize decriminalization in the bill that we wrote. What got adopted was the governor's version of the bill, which wasn't very equitable and included some very deliberate economic redlining, which we'll get into in a minute. But we really thought that this could be a new industry of opening up not just a green industry, but opening up an economic opportunity to the people who have been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs, or as my colleague also in the Connecticut legislature says, Robin Porter, the war on brown and black people. And what has ended up being rolled out is a rather rigged system in terms of getting into this market. So we're going to try to fix that and level up the playing field in subsequent legislation. But I'll let you know. It's a messy thing. It's a messy situation. There are some big interests always, but you know what? I really believe that the public interests are bigger. And when the public mobilizes and demands policy, good policy, that's when your legislature moves. And that's what I'm hoping that this forum can help us do. My district is 135, Easton, Weston, and Reading. We do have, I think, the only little hemp farm on municipal property in the state of Connecticut.
Hello, so my name is Jason Ortiz. I'm the Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and I'm a resident of Connecticut. I was born and raised in New London, Connecticut, and had the unfortunate history of being one of the folks arrested for cannabis possession as a young person. So back in 2000, I was living in Norwich, Connecticut, and I was a sophomore in high school, walking on the way to school, smoking a joint, and security guards decided to surround us in golf carts as soon as I got on the campus of the Norwich Free Academy. I went to NFA for any Norwich folks in the room. It's a pretty big high school. And they expelled me from school and threw me into the criminal justice system. I narrowly avoided being incarcerated, but only after my parents spent tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees to make sure that I didn't get incarcerated. But luckily, thanks to the advocates in this room, all of the folks that have been doing good work on drug policy for a long time, I was able to go to college because they changed the Higher Education Act's federal aid elimination penalty. That was a federal law in the budget that said if you got a cannabis or any drug arrest, you would be denied Pell Grants and other financial aid. But because of the work of advocates to change that law, I was able to go to the University of Connecticut, graduate. I actually joined SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, as a chapter member, and now I'm the executive director working to change all of the drug policies across the whole country to make sure that folks that are in high school now won't have to suffer the same way that I did. And in that role, I was able to learn about all kinds of different drug policy, but eventually became one of the founders of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, where we worked very heavily on equity policies. That experience led me to actually be on the governor's task force for licensing. In that role, I was able to advise the governor on how we should roll out licensing and equity. He promptly ignored all of our recommendations from that task force, and we ended up having to introduce our own bill, HB 6377, that was much more heavily focused on workers' rights and equity in the cannabis industry. As that process developed, we fought for all kinds of different things in the legislation, and we're going to talk a lot about some of the things we didn't do, but we did get a lot of different important changes, including anyone who is under the age of 18 will not be arrested for cannabis possession ever again. So I was able to make it so that the folks that came after me, and it required all of the various institutions of K through 12 learning to change their policies for cannabis to be equal with alcohol. So that idea that we'll expel folks for multiple years out of high school just for possession is no longer a thing. So I'm a product of very small tweaks to very specific legislation, radically improving my life. And so ever since then, I've been a policy activist in making sure that we fight for all of those small details, because you never know when it makes it possible for someone to go to school or somebody to start a business or to become the next executive director of the movement.
Amazing, the work this gentleman does. But it is sad because my nephew was actually just refused government loans as a college student because he got busted in Denver, which is kind of sad, in Colorado, with like 6 joints. So he, unfortunately, that law has not been as reparative as we wished. It still will impact you if you're in college because, you're over a certain age, and there you go. But there have been a lot of good laws. We've had 30 cannabis laws proposed in the Connecticut legislature this year. That's a lot, I think. There was one from the Hamden gentleman to completely eliminate the entire RURACA, just repeal the whole law. I don't think they were going to give back the $35 million that they took in the fees for the lottery, but they wanted to repeal the entire framework, which was ridiculous. And then there was a bill that probably some of you that are following it saw, with numerous things in it, everything from totally eliminating infused products, no gummies. I mean, no edibles. We have competition from other states. If we're going to close gates and close doors to products, people are going to continue to see us as that drive-through place. What we're trying to do, and I know they have a new website, ctvisits.com, we're trying to get people to spend the night in this state. And we're trying to thereby craft legislation that gives us things like consumption lounges and gives us some great products and gives us good beverages and gets people involved in creating jobs, creating, all kinds of neighborhood initiatives, but also just not being that pass-through state. So we can, maybe talk to Ann about some of the things that she's proposed, and then we can have Lou tell us why he doesn't like any of them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, actually, I haven't proposed any this session, but I am eager to mobilize the pressure to fix the bad parts of what has been. And there are a lot of options. There's a lot of options with the consumer Protection Commission, which oversees the Social Equity Council, that could, repeal the $3 million fee for just getting a license, and or offer tax credits, or offer some kind of we have all these defunct state buildings on the rolls that are not paying any kind of taxes that we could offer as as an asset for some of these licensees to build out and to renovate and to revitalize their corners, because we need some real estate, we need some buildings, we need some infrastructure to do that. There's been some desire for hemp farmers to be able to, because they hold a hemp license from DOAG, the Department of Agriculture, to get a cultivator license. And there's some equity issues around that. There's the rollout has been poor and messy, and but who's accountable? That's the question I think that we're wrestling with now. Who's accountable? And I believe the state is accountable. The state is accountable for a less than stellar rollout. And there was a point where we thought maybe we should not roll it out at all until we can get this right. But then there were others that say, well, we can fix it. And, in subsequent, so let's fix it. So that's the opportunity that we have now. So, you're all in the room with the policy making, body, that we have some vehicles to fix it that are in the pipeline for this session. And, so yeah, I'm looking for input as to what those top 3 fixes should be. Lou, I'm sure you've got some. What do you think? Top 3 fixes.
Top 3 fixes. So the pathway into legalization was an interesting one in the state. There were ultimately 3 options. You can either completely buy your way in with a $3 million fee, which was tough, inequitable, and everything else. You can talk bad about it. I chose that option. Option 2 was partner with one of the existing operators, the multi-state operators, and take an equity joint venture partnership, which you would be extorted, in all honesty, which many people did. Which now we're in the process of, once again, do what we can right now and then fight it the next way. Then the third way was the lottery, which was a very slighted, hard pill to swallow, which I didn't even go into. I didn't even see myself having an opportunity to win a license on the lottery side. So that's why we did go into the other portion, but I did it a little bit different. I had to take a huge loan, a huge loan with a financial institution that doesn't do cannabis. They just do financial investing. So now I'm taking loans at like 250%, and it's predatory. And then now we're at and yeah, it's ridiculous. It is. It's 2.2 times. Yeah, 2 times what I took.
You did a better attorney.
Yeah. So.
I didn't do that.
Yeah. So those are those beginning stages, and it's absolutely horrible. So now we're looking at how do we fix it. So the biggest fixes, I believe, is they were very critical on the operational agreements. So now there's a time where the state can actually intervene and actually work through with the social equity applicants to go through those partnership agreements and help rectify some of the bad deals that we did have to make the way that we did have to make them if you wanted to play in the game. It absolutely sucks. I am blessed that I'm in the place where I am my own boss, but that also didn't come with because I didn't partner with an MSO or one of the larger established entities. I don't have a standard operating procedure ready to go. So we're kind of banging it all out as it goes. I have one person that came over, and she's my financial lady. If I wanted, like, this is all out of my pocket today. Nautilus isn't paying for it because they control the pockets. They control everything. So we kind of push at it. So one big thing is the operational agreement and the backing from the Social Equity Council to actually support the people that are in place. Next, the actual way people get licenses. A $3 million fee is ridiculous, but I'll sign like the guy. If I had to pay it and I had to find it and I had to figure out a way to do it, then it's the way that I had to choose to do it. And if somebody wants to come in under the same licensures, then they should have to pay the same dollarage. So if the hemp farmers want to come in, charge them $3 million. Like they'll find it. I did, and I'd invest $3 million into a hemp farm that wanted to go over because the state will allow us to grow in those facilities. And I'd rather invest $3 million to build out a business than to actually just pay a fee. So it's a catch-22 with everything.
That's a good point.
If you want to come on in, realistically, I'll keep it. Farmers are stereotypically the white, and they own the largest percentage of land in our areas. They have made sure to find the tax loopholes to get through it. I've worked on many farms where, I only make $10,000 a year. You run a $5 million like greenhouse. What are you talking about? Oh, that's an expense. My wife only makes X amount and she's put on the business a certain way. And then you figure out how generationally people have gotten through taxes, gotten through businesses. You want to understand why the government loves small business, because you can write everything off. It's ridiculous. The whole big thing on, I got to see the taxes. I got to see the taxes. If they're smart, they ain't paying no fucking taxes. The government has made sure that you don't have to. You know what I mean? It's crazy once you start moving into this place. Money, they print it now, right? For some stupid reason, for nothing. Yeah. And it's just, how do you get it? How do you move to it? Who's controlling it? And then to find out in this space, it's the same 5 or 6 companies controlling everything from top to bottom. Right now we're watching acquisitions go in. Biggest one is Canopy acquiring Acreage, which is the botanist in Connecticut. So you'll start seeing that infrastructure change within the next year. If you're a customer, you might start losing your discounts. Your favorite bud tender might be making less money. Why? Because they overturn the upper management, and that trickles down. Straight up corporate cannabis, like most other businesses. And now the hardest thing is trying to make sure that when we start these businesses, we don't fall into those circles. I guess the easiest way was conversation a couple seconds ago. I'm not a member of the Connecticut Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. I kind of refuse to pay it. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate Jennifer when she came up here and talked, and I look forward to speaking with her and everybody else. But these are Jamie, I'm sorry. So, you know what I mean? These are those pitfalls and things to change, because you get stuck in a place that you're like, wait a second, now I'm here, but I'm the little guy, but I'm still the big guy. What do we do? Do we fall into that pit and become the same corporate structure? Or do we actually continue to fight? We're going to talk about policy and how things affect that. With 280E, I have to charge more for my weed, because it cost me $2,500 a month just to do banking in Connecticut. You know what I mean? It's a high industry, high touch. You have to have somebody dedicated. Don't get me wrong. I love them. They answer my phone call all the time. They make sure my money's there. They're like, oh, cool, Mr. Vega. Treat me like a really cool dude, unless they see me. Then it's like, who the fuck is that guy? And they're like, they had the door locked. They locked the door on me once. I was walking in, and the teller comes in, locks the door. I was like, yo, I'm a customer. He goes, Mr. Vega. Well, who is that? And I was like, because it's Fairfield. We're in Connecticut. Yeah, it was complete Greenwich. And I'm down there, and I look the way I look. And they were like, we don't service the gardeners, sir. And I was like, oh, yeah. No, I was like, yeah, it sucked. It absolutely sucked. Are you okay? And I reek like weed. I had to show my ID like 3 times. And you don't think that those things still happen, but they do. Who wants to take that guy serious? Oh, well, I just work there. I walk around. This, that, and if you don't know who I am, that's why you didn't get where it is. And I'm just the guy who moves some forklift bullshit. You know what I mean? I work in the mailroom. Looking me up, everything. I said, I work in the mailroom. On everything, I work in the mailroom. That's it. I'd change the whole fucking program, but.
Yeah, you're only responsible for most of the legislation, along with Jason and some others.
They didn't give us our legislation.
So real quick, I don't know if you understood what Lou was alluding to. There is a bill that we are shocked that was passed through the Senate, through the committee, General Law Committee, that allows hemp farmers now to retroactively, well, not retroactively, allows hemp farmers to enter this cannabis arena. And rather than pay the $3 million for 100,000 square feet and above canopy, as Lou did, you can come in at $12 a square foot. So thereby, if you're doing 100,000 square foot, that's 1.2 million, not 3 million. Therefore, I think it's wrong. We put up a dozen memos. I know I personally wrote a dozen memos solicited by representatives that asked me, what are the 2 things or the 5 things or the 7 or the 10 things we should do? And my number 1 was always let the hemp farmers convert now so that we have a good supply chain. That did not happen. There hasn't been 1 seed put in the ground in 2023, and I don't think we'll have a crop this year. And now they want to let the hemp farmers in, and now they want to let them in at a reduced rate. That does a number of economic damaging things to Lou. Lou had to forego certain things. All the gentlemen and ladies that got into this had to give up an awful lot. And now they're being told, well, these guys are coming in at a reduced rate. There are a lot of factors that go into that, but that's the general overview. And I personally don't think that it should have been done this way. I don't think it's equitable. They should have done it in the beginning. And now that they haven't done it, they should wait and see how the rollout is and give us some support. The second thing I also agree with Lou on, and that I was always number 2 in my memoranda, was to work around the IRS code 280E that only allows you to deduct the cost of goods sold. So not your payroll, not a lot of different things. It really is impactful, particularly if you're a retailer. But there are many impacts on the whole supply chain. And we've asked for that for years. And we did a panel last year called Connecticut, which is amazing. I thought it was the nutmeg state. It's the land of steady habits. I don't know why you would embrace that, but that is their motto. So our panel last year, which the reason they were in a bigger room is they knocked the wall down, was called The Land of Steady Habits, Just How Much Racism Can Connecticut Keep? And we are now seeing that borne out. And the 280E workaround wasn't done. The hemp farming thing wasn't done. Now they're trying to bring it in. So as the land of steady habits, Connecticut seems to me, or our governor and the administration, only to be reactionary. They see New York does it. They see Maryland implemented in the statute once it was the ballot initiative was passed. They see Rhode Island did it. Massachusetts, they're like, oh my God, we have to do it now. There are just too many following things rather than leading things that would have helped shape our industry, get us a competitive advantage with all our surrounding states, because again, we're that drive-through state, and that would have leveled the equity playing field. But instead, all those were ignored, and now we're trying to build them back in. So I don't think they're doing it the best way that they could.
Yeah, so I was somebody that did not have the $3 million and so did not put in for that license and actually decided not to invest in Connecticut because I knew it was going to be so messy. All of this is super overcomplicated, right? The reason that it's all like this is because some folks are trying to control who gets to sell weed and who doesn't, right? So it's my friends can sell weed, your friends cannot. And I didn't really want to have to get into that mess. And so instead, we actually opened up a cultivation facility in Puerto Rico that has a much more simple structure. And my business partner, Wesley Jackson, is in the audience today. So thank you for your leadership on that, because we learned a lot about what industry could look like if you had a supportive government that just wanted you to be able to open up for business. And so it is a much different sphere over there than it is here, where literally, even if you have $1 million right now, you can't just go get a license. You have to go through this whole process. We may not have another lottery. There could be no more licenses given. It's all a hot mess. And so I actually chose to focus on some of the not business related aspects of the cannabis space, right? Because remember, we were a community fighting to get folks out of prison before we were worried about tax write-offs, right? And so I want to make sure that as we move forward, one of the things that we forgot to do was actually release folks from prison. We did not actually put in any law that says if you were incarcerated for cannabis crimes and now it's legal, that you will be able to get out. So we have folks currently incarcerated, currently being prosecuted for selling 4 ounces that are watching folks sell thousands and thousands of pounds a year. Like the scale that we're talking about is the felonious scale of cannabis that is being sold while folks are still being prosecuted to this day. So we are pushing a bill called HB 6787, and it's actually a Judiciary Committee's bill, and we were able to go and testify. Lou came out and supported us at that press conference, so thank you, Lou, as always. But even then, the chief state's attorney said, when they asked very directly, are you still prosecuting cannabis cases right now? He said the answer to that is yes. And the way that I would fix it is to make the legalization bill retroactive. And of course they should have did that the whole time, right? Legalization should mean that you no longer are going to be incarcerated for this activity. And so that particular bill being championed by Chairman Gary Winfield and Steve Staffstrom is currently in the Judiciary Committee. So if you have any folks that are on that committee, or just whoever your rep is, ask them to support that effort, because we have a tremendous amount of work to do on the criminal justice side of it before we even start talking about how we're going to be able to stand up entire economies. The governor did say that he expunged 40,000 records that were over the last 15 years or so. But if there was 40,000 records, how many folks are currently in prison or currently being prosecuted? We don't know. They haven't been able to give us that answer. And it's embarrassing that we don't know how many people are currently incarcerated. Other big piece that's going to come out of this is the community investment side. So there's going to be millions of dollars set aside in various funds, and how they do that and moving things around. There's actually a bill to reduce the amount of money that goes into the social equity fund and move it to other places before we've even gotten started. And so all of your communities can benefit from community investment from tax dollars. I'm sure everyone here could see a spot in their town or their neighborhood that could use some investment. And right now, there are not nearly enough folks fighting to make sure that that money goes where it's supposed to go. We are trying to make sure that that happens. These $3 million fees that Lou is speaking to are supposed to go into this fund, and we want to make sure that it goes into the right places. But if the public, if the communities, if the cities, if the municipalities aren't at the Capitol saying it should come to my community, it's going to go to the communities that do show up. And we're in that fight right now. So that is definitely another piece that when I think of equity, it's ownership and licensing, criminal justice reform, and community investment are the three pieces of equity. We got a lot of folks focused on one part, and the rest of our communities are being left behind on the other two. And so again, HB 6787 is the bill that would help folks get out of prison, but there are lots of changes to the laws that I think we should support, and there's different aspects. We can create new licenses, and I'll just end quickly on this. One of the things that I learned from figuring out what Section 149 and the equity joint ventures, that you can create all kinds of things in the law. You can create whole new programs and whole new ideas of licenses. You can create stuff that's never been heard of, and we can do that in our favor. We can create new license types and ask the state of Connecticut to create those license types, like an event license, like any kind of caregiver that is somebody that is essentially a home grower for a number of patients. Those types of licenses can be created too. So the law can be used in our favor or against us. There are a lot of folks creating some wild things that are really difficult for us to be a part of, but it's incumbent on us. And you don't have to be a lawyer to actually create bills. You can work with amazing state reps like Ann Hughes in order to introduce legislation that benefits us. So collectively, we can get creative of how we want to do it here in Connecticut and do it ways that everywhere else in the state would be envious of in the country.
Yeah.
What he said, a couple of things that you brought up. One, you brought up is who owns the land. Like, you know, when we talk about generational economic redlining, there are certain people that don't own any land, and that's deliberate. Okay, so this is an opportunity to reconcile, which we have failed. We have failed in this reconciliation, opportunity. The second thing is really the afterthought of those who are being prosecuted right now for something that is fully legal and that people are making money off of, fully legally, fully profiting off of, and that is deliberate too. So how do we create and the third thing that that Jason talked about is the community will. And, there has been a community all along around, Students for Sensible Drug Policy. There's been a community of people who love the plant and said, this is not plutonium, it's a plant. And the other thing that I wanted to mention that we did finally get in the bill that we passed in 2021 was home grow or no go. And you know why we got that? Because it was simple. Everyone understood it. We shouted it from the home grow or no go. This ain't going anywhere without home grow. So I just wanted to mention that.
So I think the one thing to continue to remember is no matter what you're doing is be the advocate that you want to see. So if you want to see an advocate fight for something, go ahead and do that. It really doesn't take much other than a phone call, an email, or anything else. Mm-hmm. We talk about what it takes to move here. I joke about it, somebody is, this is from days of driving 15 hours to the top of Maine, picking up 20 pounds, driving it back down, worrying about if I'm going to get pulled over. When people say it was lucky and you just got something and moved over, that man right there rode with me for 12, 14, 16 hours, making sure I had a white boy in the car to make sure we were good in certain parts of Maine, and drive it back down and then move it in the weekend. But that was what the industry was at certain points. I was arrested for growing weed. So you take it from those long rides and say, you know what, I'm going to grow it myself. And I have Crohn's disease. I was a medical patient. I was still on probation and parole while I was a medical patient. So now it's cool. Piss in a cup. It's hot for weed. I got a card. No problem. So you see the transition of where it is and the control that's necessary in certain places. We know that Connecticut's not going to be, unless we voted and make it happen. But Connecticut, with the current people in place, is not going to be the place that's going to be willy-nilly and free for everything. And it sucks. And that's why we need more people advocating for different laws. If you're seeing something that you don't like and you want to be able to grow, I grow weed. I don't hide it. I never did hide it. That's why I went to jail. But if you come to my office, my private room, my I guess we call them houses now. I'm a medical patient. What's the law? I don't know how to say it without getting arrested. Yeah, when you see it grow, that might be in my residence in some space. It looks great. We grow. I don't tell anybody not to grow. You want to grow, go right ahead. Me, this is a business now. As crazy as it sounds, this became a business. I love growing weed as a passion, as a hobby, but that weed isn't going to be my weed once the doors open up. Now it's tracked seed to sale. I may be able to design the grow program and go in and see everything, but I have 50 grow rooms. So I have 50 employees taking care of each one of those grow rooms. Each one of those cultivars does something different. And it costs more than time, more than money. It costs my freedom. It costs my family. My wife left me over 8 years ago, so that, my kids, I don't get to grow up with them. So when anybody says, you're successful in life, or, hey, you're making it happen, you don't know. And these are the battle stories that you can hear on the legacy side every single day. And these are not the stories we're hearing in the legal adult use market here in Connecticut. I was on a panel yesterday, a great panel. Everyone on that panel has some professional degree in some professional manner, and that's how they're integrating it in. They partnered with another very large organization, and God bless every single one of them and what they're doing. But I didn't have those luxuries. Talk about the laws are horrible to find a partner to do something. Now the state makes you give up 65% or 51%, a certain percentage. And it's hard to get funding when you literally have to keep that for 7 years, depending on the type of license that you've done. So now you have to be self-sustaining in some manner. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's the guts, the glory, the whole idea, and how do you get into it? I guess that's the one thing. If you didn't get a license, now's the time to get an attorney, create your intellectual property, create a licensing deal, create your formulations, package it all up into a little package that you can pitch to licensed producers, because this is what's being done in every other state. This is what's being done in Cali. They are now brand brokers, individuals that go out to the West Coast, get licensing agreements to distribute brands, bring that to new emerging markets, so that individual will come to me, set an appointment, sit with me for 15 minutes, open up a book and say, I've got 75 different brands from the West Coast. We'll send you all the packaging. We'll send you all the recipes. We'll send you what it is, and you can just roll it out on your own, and you give us a cut. And that's what you're going to see a lot of happening. You won't see that from Nautilus. We are actually taking time to do this. I literally get this was a master's level. This was somebody, if just those words right there, a lawyer will charge you $1,000 easily for just tell you that. That was free information that you can literally take and put this together on yourself. You can use AI ultimately. You can go on ChatGPT, create a licensing agreement for X amount, and then have it reviewed and save yourself a ton of headache. But then you'd actually be a licensed. So we're going to give new emerging brands that come from the legacy market to get their first foot in a large cultivation center. What that does is now allow us with our partners to send those brands to Massachusetts, send that same brand to Ohio, sell that same brand in Michigan. And this is through intellectual property and licensing agreements. So you may not have gotten a license in Connecticut, but what's going to stop you from creating a brand? I have to make sure that whatever I do creates my legacy. So now, as an individual, other than investors and everything else, I have to create my brand, sell it to my company, and then retain the rights to that. So anybody in music understands maintaining your masters, your intellectual property goes so far. So right now, I would say whatever's messed up, be your own advocate and get your paperwork done.
So first he said, get a lawyer, and then he said, use ChatGPT. Do not use ChatGPT. I asked it yesterday or a couple weeks ago, what would be the good things about legalization of cannabis? And they said all this stuff. And then I said, what are the bad things? And they said the same thing. I was like, this is not working for us. And I also charge 1/3 of what everyone else charges, but that's just me. No, I've actually really encouraged a lot of people who have not gotten in to do licensing agreements. I personally am getting in that way. I put in probably 50 lottery applications with 2 different social equity friends of mine, and we didn't get anything. So we spent a lot of money for nada, and we're not going to be shut out. We're just going to continue to, I know some of us want to capture the culture in our products, and I think that's a really smart place to be. I think a niche that captures your particular culture in your brand that can then, maybe have a couple iterations of that, and then you can bring it to different states. I'm also bar admitted in Maryland and Washington, D.C., and Maryland just had a ballot initiative with some great things put in. So we're doing things like farm to table and some good stuff. They're screwing the hemp farmers, but that's another topic. And D.C., I don't know if people know, is the Wild West. You can self-certify. They got chocolates with psilocybin all over the place. They got little jelly beans that'll do a lot of different things. And it's very interesting because a lot of those guys actually hold licenses in Maryland and Virginia, but they manufacture in DC because they can do whatever the heck they want. And those brands I'm bringing up here, hopefully. I've got a couple Easy Day, I don't know, but a couple really great brands. And I think so if you are someone who wants to get in, definitely approach the people, by the way, that have the licenses. It's all on the ct.gov website. You can find out who has a license. You can go to them and say, I have something, or I'd like to work with you and learn this process. There is another controversial thing that came up in the legislature last week, which is allowing food producers to also do food and also do beverages. So there's a huge fight that's about to happen in that regard. I don't know if you guys have been hearing that, but if we had 2 different categories, I'm not sure why the DCP put a forward statement out saying that people that didn't win a beverage can also do beverages. So there's going to be some issues there. People call me every day and they want to shut the process down and they want injunctive relief. And I will not stand in the way of all this. So other lawyers can take those cases. What I do is try to protect you, try to make sure you aren't getting predatory lending, make sure that in 3 years and a day, they're not kicking you out. Or if they are, there's not going to be a pre-market value. It's going to be a market value after you've committed all that goodwill, which is monetizable, after you've done your community reinvestment. There's a different number in 3 years, we hope, than the number today. I had a client from Jersey call me, and he's being paid in stock from a Canadian company that hasn't traded on the exchange in 2022 or 2023. The fact that the state allowed that operating agreement through is shocking. So our state, I'm glad to see, has been a little more hands-on. I think Jersey's going to have to do something because they're going to be, all their social equity people are just going to be in real trouble. I don't know if you agree with that, but there's been some incredible pushback from municipalities. There's just been a lot of things that are negative to the social equity people, like these predatory arrangements, like these, we're not giving you a board seat, but for you, they wouldn't have these licenses. I mean, these companies are coming from Canada. The guy's got 6 licenses. He spent 11.5 years in jail in 2 stints. His wife came to me and said, they're putting us back in jail. And when I read the contract, I wouldn't let him sign it. And I got on the phone with the Canadian board and said, I want board seats. I want $750,000 cash. This is what's going to happen. Otherwise, I'm bringing in the regulators. And they said to me, the regulators won't look at the operating agreements. They were right. So now what we're going to do is let this go. The man's going to open his business. He's going to get up and running. And then when they come in with their pre-market valuation, that's when we're going to have the regulators, because they know about this now, make a forward statement, and they're not going to let it go. So I think you do have to speak out. You do have to educate these guys and let them know, hey, I just signed a 250%, 30-year loan. What? Protect us. We gave you all our money. We're creating an infrastructure that's giving you tax dollars. Do something for us. So I really encourage everyone, wherever you live, to not take the status quo for granted, to fight back, to ask for what you need, and to physically, Ann and I really think people need to start coming to more events, showing up en masse, getting out of your living room and comfort zone and making your voices heard, because
Come testify.
some of this stuff is really problematic. And I don't think that the point of view from the business people and the legacy folks are getting through.
So before we run out of time, I actually want to see if there are folks that have questions from the audience. And so we have the gentleman back there, and then you'll be second right here.
Great question.
So there's one of the largest gaps we have in the state is those connecting things. People are taking courses and there is no certification for those organizations. So if you take a course from somebody, if you take a class from me, or if you take a class from anybody, if you did it with me, I would honor those things in my business. And that's kind of where you're looking for, where you want to take those courses. What companies are aligning themselves with them? The state hasn't put in any training programs that will stay forward. So like in Massachusetts, there's actually a license permit category for educators. So now that Green Roads, or I think Ellen Brown is an Air Force veteran that we actually use down here, and she teaches our courses as well. With hopeful plans that the state would recognize that program in the same way that the state of Massachusetts recognizes that program, in the same way that Rhode Island recognizes it. That way, us as industry owners, we'd know that that certification was valid. Because what's happening is we're finding that industry professionals like nurses, psychologists, anybody else in other ancillary accounting or food and beverage manufacturing or anything, they're taking classes online or someplace else, or I found this class here, I went to this place here, and they said it would look good on a resume. But if I don't recognize it as a hiring manager, then there's no connection there. I'm also starting to work with, like, the University of New Haven is my alma mater.
I was going to say UNH and UConn has,
Right.
not for healthcare, but for grow and cultivator, right?
Right.
Research.
But even there, who's going to say that the companies are going to have that partnership? None of them, other than, so University of New Haven has done a Green Roads things.
Yep.
They reached out to me as an owner and alumni saying, would you honor our student certificates? There's a lot of places that haven't done that. So, right.
Yep. Yeah, there's a California.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right.
Wow. Okay.
Like, I don't know personally, if you came to us with, and you said, hey, Lou, this is what I have for a certificate, I'd have to actually go look it up. I'd have to educate myself on it, because those education networks aren't here. The state partnered with Oaksterdam, which is trying to create an infrastructure right now. So Oaksterdam, people who have done things through Oaksterdam are now coming out of the Oaksterdam alumni network, and they're being introduced to us. You know what I mean?
But a lot of those are in the business of cannabis and like how to grow or sell the product, and not as a nurse, how you would incorporate endocannabinoid system therapy into your work and remain a nurse, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can learn how to get into the industry. But I would point you to Peter Greenspoon is a Harvard doctor who is just releasing a book, who has been in staunch advocate for changing how medical schools actually approach the cannabis plant. And it is very much an empty space, that there are not enough folks that are able to actually talk to doctors, folks that are going into residencies, all of these different spaces on this particular piece. And so unfortunately, I would say it doesn't exist. But if you're somebody that's interested in filling that void, there is definitely the demand out there for medical professionals to actually have an on-ramp, not to join the industry like in the sales sense, but to become a doctor or nurse that incorporates that, you know, science into their healing. Yeah.
Meaning you'd also have to be an entrepreneur and start your own business. Yeah, that's so what you're saying is you're looking for some place that would hire you into their there's just not very many of those either. Me, if you came to me and you said, hey, I'm an educator, my background is nursing, I know this and that, that's where I would have a space for you. Unless you wanted to say, hey, I want to be a grower, and I took a grow class, and then you move your resume that way. But as a nurse with that background and everything, the best I could do as a cultivator is outreach and education, or as an adult use retail, something there, unless you're at a certain level where you can certify. And then if you're able to certify, then you would join one of those offices or create your own office. But
so
I
think,
get, yeah.
We got the other question here, and then I believe you had a question, but this.
Nope.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
You're right about that. And the water usage and the electric usage. And we are one of the highest electricity rates in the country. Well, yeah.
Vermont just outlawed plastic packaging.
Right.
So I am working with companies that use recycled ocean waste and hemp. And I hope that's the future, because I think you're right. And I think that'll go away once all the soccer moms who are on their clonazepams and their Xanaxes stop fighting us and stop saying you're giving our little Johnny gummies, which we're not doing. And we have incredibly stringent packaging in Connecticut. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And Anne does a lot on climate change. She puts up a lot of bills. She's asked for so many things. That is just, you're right, not a priority. That's something we'd love you to tackle and take up. I dig it.
Good.
Sweet.
Good.
All right. I think
Keep
we
it
have time
coming.
for one
Keep it
more.
coming.
Okay. Paul Travellino, license holder.
What you're pointing out is one of the biggest things is when you go that route, it's super expensive. And it doesn't justify anything. It doesn't say it's not right or if it should, but that's why it's usually a low priority for a lot of people. And then the entrepreneur has to take that into account. So those are the things that we're working with. So we're not looking to do excess waste. We use solar. We're looking for regenerative ways of doing things. And then because we're in an industrial zone, we can actually support our new solar farmers. So one of the initiatives in Connecticut is that farmers who created solar fields can actually sell to agriculture and municipalities. And, you know, the buildings are in industrial zones and it gets really expensive. One of our biggest expenses is HVAC, you know, creating artificial atmospheres, lights, air. You want to talk about packaging? That's peanuts, in all honesty. You want to talk about the environmental aspect? Yeah, those things are trash. The excuse is people like convenience. It sucks, but yeah, it sucks. They are horrible pieces of equipment that would leak all the time. They have an acceptable failure rate of like 5%, which means 5%. Yeah. And the consumers will keep buying them, and it sucks, but it's one of those tough things.
telling me I've learned about pharmacology, that it's absolutely nothing to do about modified process cannabis. She goes, yes. So I spent $1,800 for a class online at local community college, and I learned practically nothing about cannabis. But the state required me to spend $1,800 to learn nothing about something I need to.
That is something. So let's talk about that. And that's exactly what we're talking about in the adult use space. The reason why you had to do that is because Connecticut is a highly regulated industry, and it sucks, but they didn't want the regular person selling cannabis. So the claim to the medical market here is that every person you talk to is a pharmacist in some style. So the bud tender that you walk up to and you talk to, they look like a regular person. Everything's cool. You're like, oh, this is my bud tender at the dispensary. No, they're actually a pharmacy tech. So they've gone through some type of education. Like you said, they've had to pay the money. Right. Once again, you wanted to enter. This is where those barriers to entry are in place. They don't want the regular individual moving into this space. You wanted to enter the space as a regular individual. You had to become a pharmacy tech and then be able to transition over. So it's a multi-step. The state doesn't force you. The crazy part is whoever was advocating at that time is the one that allowed that to happen, or to make somebody feel safe, because that's the idea. The state is saying these are trained professionals in pharmacology. Yes, we agree with you. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Nothing about the plant.
Right.
Zero
but
about
no
the
medical school. That's what Jason just said. It's federally illegal. Yep, because it's federally legal.
UConn is trying to fill a little bit of that gap around the plant.
Right. See, you're what you're alluding to is the gap that we currently have because it's still federally illegal. So that's not required in the adult use space.
So I don't think that the gap has to do with federal illegality. Anyone can create a school that is either high quality or low quality and then say, we are a school, come give us lots of money. And that doesn't get regulated even in traditional education, right? Like whether or not a university is good at what they do or relevant is per the market, right? Like the students will say, this is a trash school, don't go there. But there have been lots of shitty schools right around. The big thing with the cannabis industry specifically is that it is still entering all of the conflicting tensions that are regularly existing in society: capitalism, racism, all of these different elements. The cannabis industry is not immune to any of those. And so because there's so little regulation on everything outside of actually touching the plant, you have all kinds of folks that will rush to fill that void and see if they can scoop up lots of money. As many folks has said, you make more money selling picks and shovels to the folks that are going for the gold rush than actually panning for gold, right? And that's what these are. These are picks and shovels. The various regulators are not going to look at any of that. And the way that we can make it better is for somebody to actually create a better school, because there is not going to be a way that the regulators are going to approve every single curriculum that comes out of educational institutions as we move forward. They could, but they won't, right? There needs to be more people that actually care about those kind of things. The Social Equity Council is all volunteer, and so they're not going to be reviewing countless curriculums to then say, I approve this one or I disapprove that one. And good luck getting through a board meeting to approve an educational curriculum that says it's up to whatever codes that y'all probably have that are going to be much higher than the standards that are currently in operation. And so we're going to see that happen across the board in lots of different spaces. And it's up to us to hold these different entities accountable if they're not actually doing it, to create it, or the state has to fund it. If the state is not funding it, then the market will decide. It'll bring lots of other random folks in here and they'll just be able to produce whatever it is. Just like if you're somebody that right now, for example, a space that is doing that to a certain extent, right, is if you're a hairdresser, right? There are standards for being a hairdresser. You have to have a certain number of hours. There are schools that are approved, right? Like we could have adopted all of that. Another way to go about it too that wasn't in the legislation was apprenticeship programs through the unions. The unions could actually provide training for folks that has real on the ground tactical training for the people that are operating those spaces, and then the state can approve and disapprove that, and there's all kinds of union agreements you can make. So there are ways to do this. But unfortunately, the state of Connecticut is not trying to make it easier for everyone to get in. They're trying to make it harder for everyone to get in so that their homies are the ones that actually can navigate that really difficult process. And so we have to look at it that they're not just messing up and this is just like a slight that they didn't do it, like that they didn't think of it. They're purposefully making it really difficult. So when you're in that kind of space, you have to operate in that I'm going to demand that we have a certain access to certain things. And one of the only ways that you can actually do that is through legislation, right? Complaining to the regulators, complaining to the social equity council is not going to get there. Your state representative is there to represent you. If you're lucky enough to have Ann Hughes as your state representative, she can introduce legislation to say, we want to set aside X amount of dollars for an apprenticeship program for my area, just the same way we do to build submarines and build helicopters. There's all kinds of ways we can do it through legislation, but I can promise you that if we just leave them to their own devices, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, not better.
Now, I mean, we're working with Oaksterdam, and the people in here that have gotten certifications, I just want to tell you, the people that have already gone through Oaksterdam have to go through the reset program here again. People that know how to grow are sitting in classrooms listening to Harry Anslinger stuff, or, you know, the Stamp Act that's been modified, you know, not even existing anymore. So I would even caution you against, you know, Oaksterdam, frankly, just as someone who has, I'm spicy because I'm just like, what have they done for me lately? And I'm seeing a lot of people with multiple Gangier certificates who are not getting hired. Here in Illinois, I've got 3 clients that all went through it. They spent weeks out in the woods. They learned a lot after a few weeks and they can't get jobs. So I think we need to do better. And I think we need to give more funding, and we need to make buildings available, and we need to give 280E workarounds. And we got to stop the high Heisman, the blocking. You know, it's like, please let people through. So I know they want us to get off the stage because we've already gone 15 over. Really appreciate. Okay, we got one more. Federal law. Biden, toothless, wimpy. John Tester has just put out a great VA research bill, and that will open the door, I think, to some other legislation and possibly descheduling in a couple of years. We'll have to see.
But Biden's DEA is supposedly reviewing the scheduling and are saying it's going to take a long time. I don't foresee anything happening on the federal level. The Republican House is going to block just about anything. Maybe a gun rights bill will actually be able to make it through, and then folks will actually attach other things to that particular one. But we do have some Republicans. Nancy Mace introduced a legalization bill. She's from South Carolina. And so there are pieces of legislation floating around, but it is unlikely anything's going to happen. The safe banking was probably the thing that had the best chance, but with the banking collapse happening, that's not going to be a priority for any legislators to focus on cannabis at this time. And so I really don't think that's going to be the way it's going to happen in the next couple of years. It will be a presidential election issue. You'll be forcing whoever runs again to move, but I don't foresee anything really happening. So interstate commerce could happen through the courts. And so interstate commerce could happen through the court systems, right? And whether or not the Dormant Commerce Clause applies to interstate commerce or to illegal commerce is a big fight that is happening. It could go to the Supreme Court, quite honestly. There are folks that argue that any commerce is interstate commerce, and thus the state laws are actually in violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause. So eventually somebody's going to ship their chocolate bar. But Washington State, Oregon, and California are actually creating regulatory frameworks on their side. And what I think is going to happen is Merrick Garland will issue another memo that says the federal government will not intervene if states start to engage in interstate commerce, and that'll be the beginning of it. In Vermont.
As your attorney, I would advise you against it.
Somebody who's
Yeah. It's different when you put it on the railroads. Yeah.
The TSA is not looking for it. I do military operations, and I know they're looking for C5 explosives. They're not looking for your weed, but you got to be careful. New York has signs.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
I fly with a quarter pound everywhere.
Don't tell people.
I think it gets interesting. Yeah. We're going to